2019 Blog 135 The Faroes and Iceland Holiday, our 37th trip in the motorhome, completing Scandinavia, Part 2. Monday the 27th of May, 2019. We had to be at the ferry terminal 3 hours before it leaves for Iceland, which was 2 p.m. We heard the ship coming in from Hirtshals to Tórshavn in the early morning, so it was already in dock. No great rush, had showers and breakfast, read for a bit, filled the van with water and did dump station duties. Then finally broke camp and joined down to the check-in and had our papers and tickets checked, then joined the boarding queue. Not that many vehicles were joining, so the public queue was short, but the cargo lorries one was very long. This is the main mode of product movement between Denmark, the Faroes and Iceland. We were both allowed to stay in the van to board this time, parked behind what seemed to be a fish container. Well, the smell would indicate that. Ensured all windows and doors locked, we took our overnight stuff and valuables up in the lift to the cabin. This time I think we were on floor 15, one off the top. Settled in, had a nice evening meal and then just one night's sleep and we would be in Iceland, so looking forward to it. We loved the Faroes, but maybe a week and a half would have been enough, however ferry crossing times would not have allowed that anyhow. So, on to the next stage of our fantastic journey. Tuesday the 28th of May, 2019. We both slept, even if it was a little rocky. Up early, packed and then went down for breakfast, and very nice it was too. We were then called over the Tannoy as the boat docked at 9 a.m. in Seydisfjordur, Österland, Iceland, which borders both the Norwegian and Greenland seas. It is the most easterly town in Iceland. Get ready, your next adventure begins. Here is a list of top towns by population in Iceland. We visited quite a few of them on our journey but tried to stay as remote in general as we could. It is what we like. We got off the boat amid flurries of snow. It was cold, and I mean cold. We drove through the town to the campsite near the old church. We checked in and hooked up to electrics and immediately put the fire on, so grateful for Icelandic hat and gloves whilst setting up. We then went for a long walk around Seydisfjordur, around the lake, through the old streets, into the church, back to take pictures of the Naronno in port, and inside the ferry terminal for a warm-up and pick up tourist brochures. We then visited a craft shop on the lake edge, all very interesting, back past the school, town hall and into the supermarket to buy a few things, especially SKYR yogurt. Why wouldn't you? Note: food prices are extremely high in Iceland. Expect to pay for a basket of goods what you pay for a whole trolley back in the UK, but that is the nature of the beast. Wednesday the 29th of May, 2019. It had snowed quite a bit overnight. Because of the snow and the more mountainous area in the north, we decided to go around Iceland clockwise. This meant heading south first. Anyhow, we bit the bullet and left to go up over the mountain. My most scary drive ever in the van. Driving snow meant we could hardly see anything even with the wipers on their fastest. The road was so covered in snow you could not see it, and on either side of the road, wherever that was, with no barriers or markers, was frozen lakes. Scary, frightening. I drove very slowly. We seemed to climb and climb on the Highway 93 on what is known as the Seydisfjordur mountain pass, all 17 miles of it. Past Vatn at the top and on to Egilsstaðir. The relief as we started to descend was palpable. We had made it. I'm sure the views were spectacular, as we can attest to, as we returned at the end of the holiday when the weather was so much better, but on this day, we only stopped at one huge waterfall for a photo opportunity, but otherwise it was just a case of get out and be thankful, otherwise we could have spent quite a while hemmed in Seydisfjordur. We visited the museum in Egilsstaðir, very interesting, lots of cultural stuff, and especially liked learning about moose and winter survival techniques. After a good look around this town and discovering its supermarkets and petrol station, we replenished the diesel just in case. We headed out on Highway 1, the main circular route around Iceland, through the fabulously scenic mountain pass and valley to our favorite campsite in Iceland at Reykjavik. Note: I got the spelling wrong on my images. Hardly surprising the difference between sound and spelling with some of the Icelandic names. We set up on the site on the only hard standing we could find in case of heavy snow, near the amenities block, which was very good. Couldn't work out how to pay until a lady came along in her car and knocked on the window. We now know as stayed here again at the end of the holiday. Its lake, river, waterfall, mountain views, ducks and clean air made it a pleasure to stay here. Thursday the 30th of May, 2019. We left Reykjavik having had a good drive around the town and harbour area and headed east out around the fjord, the 12-mile drive to Isafjordur, on Highway 92, stopping initially at the point at Strongholmi at the tourist viewing point. Along the fjord edge there were masses of wild lupins growing, making it just so colourful. We had to cross the bridge on the 950 to get into Isafjordur past the swimming pool and on to have a look at the campsite there. Not good, far too hilly and in fairness too close to last night's site. Across the bridge is the Helgustad spar mine. Having had a good look along the harbour front, we returned and travelled under the tunnel on the Nordfjordarengong, coming out in beautiful, lush green farming deep valley countryside full of livestock near Hola. We then drove all the way to the tip at Hvammstangi on the 92. This only took a further 15 minutes. The tunnels in Iceland are a whole lot better than those on the Faroes. We then returned to Isafjordur and back through Reykjavik, heading south and turning back onto Main Highway 1 all the way down to where the River Dalsa met the fjord. We briefly stopped in Isafjordur at a craft shop where we talked to the very nice lady there who told us currently because of overfishing her husband's boat was holed up in port, so times were hard. However, she then told us in the next breath she was driving to Reykjavik and back the next day to do some clothes shopping. A 16-hour trip, what? She must be nuts. It would mean traveling at night, which I guess she would be used to, but in the dark, moose elks and all, no way. After Isafjordur, where we also had lunch, and tried to visit the Aurora exhibition we had found out about in the amenities block at Reykjavik, which was sadly closed, we went on to see the gardens of the Rock Lady at Stuvafjordur, the volcano, benign hopefully, craft brewery and post office, shut, at Breiðdalsvík. Had hoped to get fish and chips here. We eventually pulled into Djúpivogur, a nice harbour, and the campsite behind the cafe on the harbour's edge. It was quite a touristy area, but the site was okay for one night. The facilities weren't great, but we set up, had a tea and then went to the cafe for a lovely meal of fish and chips, and looked at the kiddies' books, haha. The curry batter on the fish was a very enjoyable novelty. It took 1 hour 30 minutes of driving from lunch to tea with a bit added on for photo opportunities obviously, haha. Friday the 31st of May 2019. Packed up the van and had a quick look around the harbour area before driving around the Djúpivogur headland to see the Gledvik egg sculpture display not far away, at Gledvik or Merry Bay in English. Truly amazing. We parked up and walked from one end to the other. So pleased to have seen this, found it on one of our many tourist brochures. Just classy when we consider they were hand-ground by the artist and his crew. We then stopped at the waterfall between Norka and Valnes for a view of the magnificent waterfall there. It also had a statue claiming to be the site of the birth of Christianity in Iceland. We then travelled across the Longsvik Grit Bowl, a weird gravel shelf that in fairness folk had lived on back in the day, but such poor farming land. The wind wiped up across it and to this day we still believe there are bits of grit buried in the window frames. We had been warned but had no choice. We stopped at an information board at one point where a young couple were trying to start their outdoor stove to cook on, but really with no hope. The winds were far too strong and even if the flame did ignite it would sadly be pebble dashed with grit. It took about a further hour and a half from here to the town of Hvammstangi where we were staying for the night. We had lunch in one of the less windy areas along the way. As we approached Hvammstangi we could see the Vatnajökull glacier in the distance. The largest glacier as far as I know in the world, and certainly in Iceland. It's huge, going from south coast to almost the north one, sadly receding nowadays because of global warming. We went in the Hvammstangi Museum, very interesting, and had a nice walk along the harbour and saw all the icebreaker ships. We even had a look at Hvammstangi Beach. The lady at the check-in office wouldn't let us in before 3 p.m. so we read in the van and then set up on our pitch, hard standing and grass with fab views. There were 2 Dutch couples in front of us who set up awnings attached to their small VW vans. Not clever in those high winds, took them forever. We liked this site, it had nice surrounds and KeefH went to explore and almost got blown off the cliff. Tee whilst taking pictures. Still, even if cold it was sunny. We liked Hvammstangi a lot. Saturday the 1st of June 2019. At Hvammstangi I looked at the speedo in the van and realized we had now driven 2,000 miles and loved every moment of it. Just found out Vatnajökull is Europe's largest glacier. That settles that then. We filled up with water at Hvammstangi camping before setting off along the south coast with fantastic views of both the sea and the Vatnajökull glacier. A truly wonderful drive of just over an hour and 50 miles to the Jökulsárlón area. We parked up in the free car park, wrapped up warm and set off for some fabulous views of blue icebergs, highlighted by the clear light. Initially it was teeming with tourists from the many coaches that stopped there. You could also do a boat trip around the seawater fjord to see the icebergs close. We didn't do that. After a while all the coaches left, and apart from a few motorhomers we had all the views to ourselves. We took lots and lots of pictures, not having seen this since St. Andrews in Newfoundland, Canada in 2010 at Iceberg Alley, just a wonderful sight. We even saw bits break off and float out to sea. Duck tours had finished for the morning session, tee-hee. We stopped at the memorial at Jallens en route to Jökulsárlón. We then drove a further 2 hours 20 minutes along the south coast, moving into the south region from what was officially the eastern area of Iceland, arriving at campsite Vik at about 3:30 p.m. We saw Skatafell en route and some great scenery, lakes, mountains and rocks carved by glacier movement. A big campsite with limited electrical hookup, but we found one. It had reasonable facilities in a long block at the end of the site. The strange-shaped office and cooking area was full of backpackers, so we decided to cook in the van. It had been a long journey today, so we read, relaxed, and went to bed early. We will have a look around Vik tomorrow. Sunday the 2nd of June, 2019. Up early, had to do one thing at a time, electricity-wise this morning as very low amps on the electricity. So, it was kettle, then hot water, then heating, as more than one outlet and the trip switch flipped and Keef was forever outside resetting the electrics. Not great, indeed the worst we had come across on our travels so far, reminded us of our French trip in the van in 2014, blog 71. We then drove out of the campsite at Camping Vik up to the church and had a walk around, taking in the magnificent views of the nearby Katla Geopark. We also visited the village and the weird Britannia-type sculpture outside the main Vik Hotel on Ostervega. We noticed at the site that people were arriving and using the showers and then driving off, all for free, as Camping Vik had no barriers or lookout. Plus we saw one family obviously driving go Reykjavik who had the sun laying down in the back of their low-level van, totally illegal, who all popped in for a shower then popped off, as it was so busy us paying customers didn't bother. We then drove the short 15-minute trip off the main highway 1 down to Reynifjörður beach, which was part of the Katla, active volcano, geopark. This beach is noted as the most dangerous in Iceland because of the freak sneaker waves. We parked in the rough car park and walked down past the cafe onto the mostly black sand beach, with views of the rock stacks just off the coast called the Troll's Fingers, Reynis Stranger. We also saw the cave and basalt fingers, collectively known as De Holaus, and what looked much like London Bridge that we saw on the Great Ocean Road in Victoria, Australia in both 2008 and 2017, or Durdle Door in Dorset in the UK. On Iceland their equivalent is called De Holii. A very interesting beach. As always there were a whole bunch of young tourists right on the beach edge, foolishly tempting the freak waves despite the explicit warnings. #fools. The board showed the most recent deaths, a Chinese man and an American woman who had already visited 5 times. From Reynifjörður we returned to the main highway and continued on clockwise past the incredible volcanic terrain of Katla's Geopark, with its lava rock covered over by a thin green clear air growth that reminded us of oak moss, just not sure what it really was. From here it was a 35-minute drive to the town of Skoga in Sudherland, or Southland, and the magnificent waterfall called Skogafoss, just breathtaking. See the images. From here we drove on to Volsvollur, where we had lunch in the Lava Center car park before paying to visit a very interesting museum where we learned about Iceland's volcanic background. Indeed its heritage was to rise out of the sea as the result of an undersea eruption. It still has many active volcanoes, witness the one that brought much of the world's air flights in 2010 to a halt called Eyjafjallajökull. The museum had sights, sounds, shaky replicas to make you feel you were there, and facts galore. We learned a lot. Heads full and buzzing we travelled on to our campsite for the night at Stokkseyri, limited but perfectly adequate facilities and a real bonus Icelandic ponies, just behind our pitch. The area was quite flat after what we have travelled through on the south coast. The sunset was fab. Monday the 3rd of June, 2019. We left our campsite at Stokkseyri, initially visiting the nearby coast and walking around the small village and harbour wall area. Then today was a true tourist day. We drove the 2 hours plus initially along Highway 1, turning just past Hidaba onto Highway 30 to do the 190-ish miles of the Golden Circle, views of Ingolfsfjord initially, then stopping at Haukadala in the huge tourist car park there and walking across with the other millions to see the geothermal hot water area with its bubble and trouble. We watched the main water explosions of Stroker and Geyser, and we then drove on to Gullfoss and walked up to see the amazing waterfall there, quite spectacular. We then turned back down through the Golden Circle via Myodala near the Apavatten Lake via the very weird but huge Pingalavatn down to Selfoss, and along the hugely geothermal rocky volcanic south coast where many of the active volcanoes still exude their fire every now and then, hopefully not when we were around, through Porklakshofen stopping at the Stamper crater, which was amazing as was the road surface, just so bumpy. This is where we believe we lost our front mudguard /wheel cover. Anyhow, it was then on to the fabulous Grindavik area, which we truly rated / recommended, and finally on to our campsite for the night up on the coast at Sungurdi. It was a very long drive today, but hugely satisfying in terms of all we had seen. Loved it all, amazing waterfalls, lakes, and volcanic scenery, just spectacular. Thank you, Southwest Iceland. We have to say that in a way the Golden Circle, even though hugely touristy, is the least interesting part of our trip so far. Is that sacrilege? We went past the famous Blue Lagoon, which wasn't open. The campsite at Sungurdi caused us no end of electrics fun. We just could not get the ones we were on to work, so we moved and couldn't get that to work either. Spoke to a very nice lady married to an Englishman who said in general the electrics on this site were dodgy, but she told us one point shared with us that did work. She had tried it, so we plugged in there. Yippee, success. We had wasted ages on this. When the attendant came for his money, we complained. He said he knew about it and were in the process of fixing. Sometime never. As long as he had his DOS, he didn't seem overly concerned. Not good. Tuesday the 4th of June, 2019. Packed up and left Sungurdi early and visited Keflavik Airport, where we had landed in transit on our Canada trip back in 2010. Parked up and had a bit of a look around. Didn't stay long as thought we may get charged for parking. Skinflints that we are, teehee. It took 1 hour, about 38 miles into Reykjavik from the campsite. The truck nav helped us navigate our way around Iceland's capital to the campsite, a large, gravel site laid out in long rows to accommodate a very large number of caravans / motorhomes. We chose one right at the back with grass at the back facing the National Sports Stadium and pool complex at Sundlaugavik 32. We checked in at 1 p.m, had a look around the facilities, filled up with water, then went outside the gate where the hop-on hop-off bus, stopped. We bought a 2-day ticket and proceeded to do our usual complete route around back to the site to get our bearings. Second time around on this first day in Reykjavik, we got off at the Opera House whilst it was waiting to do its circuit and took photos of the lovely harbour area, the Opera House and Vidi Island in the bay on which Yoko Ono had built a memorial to John Lennon, called the Imagine Peace Tower. Indeed, there are so many tributes now to JL on our travels, i.e., Dunnes, Scotland, blog 177, we may have to adopt him as well as James Cook, JC, as our travel hero. We rejoined the bus and returned to the campsite, knowing the sort of places we wished to get off and explore tomorrow with our ho-ho bus pass. We thought the campsite was very expensive for what you get, but I suppose it was the capital of a very expensive country, so probably to be expected. Wednesday the 5th of June, 2019. Got on the bus again outside campsite and got off at stop 2 to walk around the old harbour area, including there was a brewery tour, which sadly we did not do, but we did see the Maritime Museum and the various boats in the harbour, including the very old dry dock Gullborg and icebreakers aplenty. We loved walking around this area, including the old warehouses converted to craft shops, amazing murals, chain bikes, so clever. Plus old trad buildings in bright colours looking out onto Kollafjordur. There was even a Greenpeace boat in harbour. We had last seen one in Auckland Harbour back in 2007. We then walked back towards the art gallery and craft market. Sadly both were closed, but we peered through the glass to get a feel of what we were missing. Opposite the Kollaport market was a permanent heritage display with boards about Reykjavik's maritime history, all very interesting, especially the Viking and Scottish links. We then walked into the centre of the city restaurant area, some very disturbingly strange menus, i.e., puffin and whale, not to our taste but respect their culture. The area even had an old steam railway engine on display. We then rejoined the bus and got off at the Jornin stop, walked around the lake, called in at the council building to find a doctor's for Keef's incessant cough, which we would do later. We went to the Hard Rock Cafe nearby for a chocolate milkshake and then walked back to the doctor's surgery. Had to wait a while and pay about £30 for an appointment, but got antibiotics prescribed which eventually cleared it up. Annie would get it later. Read on. Isafjordur Hospital. After the surgery we caught the bus back around to the Opera House from the nearest Ho-Ho bus stop. This bus was the last of the day, so we had to catch an ordinary bus back to the stadium, which we managed without much trouble. Like Reykjavik, it has a nice feel. Thursday the 6th of June, 2019. Left the campsite and had to visit the dump station down near the cruise ship terminal. Haha, what a welcome for the tourist to watch KeefH emptying our waste. Class A. Then after refueling we left Reykjavik and headed north, stopping at the far end of Isafjordur in the sunshine for lunch overlooking a massive lupins in flower. After this we carried on to our campsite at Hvammstangi, now in West Iceland. We called in at Leira where there was a campsite which we didn't rate and was busy with folk in the thermal swimming pool next door. The total journey was about 60 miles on Highway 1 over the long Hvalfjordagam bridge across open water. Very interesting, great engineering. We called in at Borgans en route for a few provisions and to look at a craft shop, just too expensive. The Hvammstangi campsite was basically an open field and quite lumpy at that. We found the best bit we could, and laid the cable across the muddy track to one of the few electric hook-up. No way to pay. We eventually were able to when a young lad, presumably, the farmer's son, arrived in a car and knocked on our door. Luckily, we had cash as they don't generally accept card in these remote places. Friday the 7th of June, 2019. We left the Hvammstangi camping site, Vesturland 311, and headed back to Borgans, turning as we got towards the town onto the exquisite Highway 54 with just such fab views eventually along the Denmark Straits. We stopped at the viewing point just past Jadahafell after it had turned into Highway 56, where we got out and had a walk over some of the open volcanic landscape with Isafjordur vatn views in the background. What a spot, just magical. Took loads of pictures. Many people had stopped here to walk right down to the lake. We didn't. We then carried on the 56 turning back onto the 54, then the 58 into the historic fishing port at Stikisholmer at the end of the Borgerland Peninsula. Loved the village, walked around the harbour, talked to the fishermen landing huge catches of lumpfish, famed for its red caviar. The views of Landey Island in the background were fab. We listened to music from folk performing in front of the fancy sheep van. We walked around the heritage area and museums, then we left the harbour car park and drove up to the church high on the hill, a very modern building, great photo opportunity. We then left to travel into the Snæfellsnes National Park area, such scenery. We went anti-clockwise around the Highway 54, some of the best scenery so far, with the snow-covered Snæfell mountain in the centre of our road loop which hugged the coast. The north coast views were the Denmark Straits. We visited Grundarfjordur, then headed around to our campsite at Trudda camping near Buda. We visited Olafsvik Harbour and the lighthouse at Riff and the tourist info office at Riff, which was busy. The site had a nice cafe area. I got us coins for the shower. Sadly some parents had allowed their child to totally flood the shower, and when I put my coins in there was no hot water. I lost it. KeefH with trays. I stormed into the office wet and cold and let them have both barrels. They accepted there was something wrong with the boiler, and let me use the lovely shower for free in the hotel area. Wonderful. I also negotiated the same for Annie. The views at the site were great, but there was a lot of distance to walk. Saturday the 8th of June, 2019. Left Trudda campsite after taking a look around again at the sea and the beach. Such a nice area, not the best site as the amenities, before the trays, were poor and nowhere near enough if the site was full. The cafe looked nice though as an added facility. Here is a little summary of Buda which sums up the area well. Bur is a small hamlet in Barón lava fields in Starsveit, which is in the western region of Iceland, on the westernmost tip of the Snæfellsnes Peninsula where Ránhöfnara falls to the sea, the original old name of Bur having been Ránhöfn. I filled up with water before leaving, then we set off back across on Highway 54 to Borgans, stopped here again and got some provisions before using the main A1 route north, stopping again at Bifrost for a rest almost 2 hours into the journey and had a look at what seemed to be the deserted lava hotel there. We then turned off the A1 near Kletsia onto the magnificent High 60 up across the mountains heading north. Spectacular views on this road all the way up to Alfheimar where it merged with the 54. Despite the signs, luckily at this time of year you didn't need snow chains. Can't imagine taking the van up over this road in winter, it would be so scary. We stopped at Lager, a very small village off Highway 60 which had both a hotel and a geothermal pool. The campsite was very bumpy and lumpy and the facilities were not yet open. We found the best compromise site we could to be level and put the ramps on. As time passed, a few more motorhomes pulled up, but it was very sparse. Eventually the girls arrived to open and clean the facilities, presumably from the hotel. They collected our fees. We can safely say this is the worst campsite in Iceland that we stayed at. If memory serve me right, it was off Highway 60 to the right, may even have been a little way up the 61, can't remember. Sunday the 9th of June, 2019. Called in at Reykjavik en route today and discovered a campsite we will use later. Today I convinced Annie to go off-road. We headed west on 17 miles of gravel road to Hvammstangi around the fabulous twists and turns, mountain climbs and bridges. It took and age and shook just about everything in the van. We only did about 20 miles per hour. Once we reached the campsite we decided that we could go no further on this road, had hoped to use the gravel road to go all the way around the peninsula but chickened out. The fire had come off the wall and needed refixing. The campsite was nice with lovely views of the coast. We parked up, hooked up, went for a little walk, then relaxed after what had been quite a harrowing drive, realizing we had to go back over it tomorrow. Reflecting on Chris's flat tire in NZ back in 2017, we were going to be mega careful, just cannot afford a flat tire this far out in remote Iceland. Indeed, we didn't see that many other vehicles on the whole journey, and the ones we did we stopped for in essence in passing places on a single track gravel road. Monday the 10th of June, 2019. We then left the campsite at Hvammstangi and travelled very slowly back along the gravel road with the Denmark Straits on our right, yet again majestic scenery and all bathed in glorious sunshine. Once off the gravel track and back on tarmac on Highway 60 we turned south past Vatn Lake on the 607 down to the town of Reykjavik. This road took us along superb coastal scenery again, with so many inlets on the Denmark Straits with lots of salmon farms out in the clear waters. When the tide was out there were lots of rock pools. We filled up at the fuel station at the entry to the town of Reykjavik. Diesel is expensive this far out, but you just must do it. We then drove through the town across the many coastal rock bridges to the harbour where there was a herring canning factory, some yummy smells not. The local green dredger ship was in the harbour used to pick up the massive strangling greenweed but also the lovely nutrient used for gardening, seaweed, which was plentiful. After that we returned through the village to the campsite alongside the road opposite the church. It was on a lovely farmer's field. We hooked up along the fence edge in the flattest bit we could find, although in general it was mostly flat. The sun was out, the facilities were good. The lady in the office who had seen us arrive provided a hose through the wall so we could get water in the tank. She filled the hot tubs for us as well with seawater. We got changed in the massive changing room /shower block and had a lovely time in the hot tub using the facilities to shower and change on the way out. Just so relaxing sitting in it looking out on the mountain ledge surrounding the valley, all green and sparkly in the sun. This campsite is one of our favorites and the lady farmer was so helpful, so much so that we returned to it again later in the holiday. We had a bit of a walk afterwards down to the old houses and play park with an old heritage wood. We had our meal outside tonight on the table and chairs, as so mild and sunny, just blissful. Tuesday the 11th of June, 2019. A long drive today, so we set off early, leaving the lovely site at Reykjavik. We will be back, and travelling on the Highway 61 past the turning for Reykjavik, which we will return to later, and along the Greenland Sea on our right. It was a magnificent 3.5-hour journey which we loved every moment of, seeing fosses, rivers, aplenty, snow melts and frozen lakes on the mountain tops. This area is called the Western Fjords and in our humble opinion is the best scenery in the whole of Iceland, and let me tell you there is a lot to choose from. We stopped at Reykjavik just off the highway as needed diesel. It was a very odd pump system which took a credit card, eventually but not funny at the time, quite frustrating. Whilst here we had a quick look around. There were tourist coaches parked up outside what seemed to be a somewhat run-down hotel whose real attribute was a geothermal full-sized Olympic swimming pool outside. We circled Isafjordur and Skotufjordur and then stopped at the Heritage House in Litabey. From here we walked down the country path to the water's edge. The town folk had kindly left a pair of binoculars, very powerful ones, to allow visitors to see the seal colony on the outer rock crop. Another family in front of us had borrowed them but passed them on to us, and we saw the seals. Just lovely, so like seeing wildlife in their natural habitat. We then went on around the fjords, stopping to look at some spectacular waterfalls, emboldened by the melting snows from above, and next stopped at Reykjavik where there was an Arctic fox center, not really the right season for us. The mountains here are breathtakingly high, and sadly they had an avalanche in the village not that long ago. Scary. Reykjavik has an active volcano as well. After Reykjavik we carried on into the city of Isafjordur, and as we approached, we saw a cruise liner just coming into port. We had a quick drive around the city to get our bearings. Quite a big place, lots of supermarkets and fuel stations. The campsite was just off the main road up by the waterfall, surrounded by lovely lupins in flower. The site had a river running through it off the waterfall and was landscaped on various levels. We chose an upper one with close views of the waterfall. The facilities were at the other end of the site in the valley, but very good. We were staying in Isafjordur for 3 nights, which was a very good choice. Wednesday the 12th of June, 2019. Annie had the same bronchitis I had, so we visited the city's hospital and waited until she was seen by a doctor who prescribed antibiotics. They were all very pleasant and helpful. The consultation cost about £25 and the pills themselves a further £30, so at Iceland prices a bargain. After this we went back into the harbourside area, parked up and had a good look around. A very interesting city. We then drove out to Reykjavik and Flateyri through a myriad of tunnels, the first we have seen and been under, with a traffic intersection in to cope with conjoined tunnels. All seemed to work very well. Both these places were interesting, but especially Flateyri with its fish drying racks on the outskirts and the book museum in the high street, which we walked around, as well as the harbour. The guy in braces in the bookstore museum was a third-generation family member and showed us around the home, just so interesting. We bought some cards and took lots of pictures. A very nice day. Back to the site to eat and relax, walked around the site down to the amenities block to fill up our water bottles, sat outside for quite a while catching the sun's rays. Thursday the 13th of June, 2019. A campsite day today, washing, reading and eating outside and getting sunburnt in Iceland. Now just how good is that? It was a surprisingly hot and sunny day. Not much else to report today. Friday the 14th of June, 2019. Packed up and drove up to the entrance on the upper road for the campsite, where the motorhome service station was. After 3 days the water tank was empty, and we needed Dunny Man. The site is called the Tunguladur. So refilled with water and a clean blue loo, we went to the supermarket on the way out of town. Wow, those chiller tents where they keep the meats etc are cold, teehee. We also filled up with diesel before setting off again. We drove back along the 61 through Reykjavik and all the other twists and turns up and back down fjord after fjord off the Greenland Sea, overlooking the island of Vigor, which still had a dusting of snow on it. There are 4 long fjords on this journey, but we loved all of them. Such scenery, the best. Stopped at Amund's Point for a while to take in the views. We then drove across the Greenland Sea over the 2 islands of Ruti via the road bridge, a stunning construction. Stopped again, seals and binoculars. Finally arrived at our campsite in Drangsnes overlooking the island of Grimsey late afternoon. Big grass field site, we were the first on it, small amenities block but perfectly adequate. Set up and had a cuppa. A few others arrived later in the day. All tourists from other countries. The total journey from Isafjordur to Drangsnes was about 150 miles but took well over 4 hours with some of the roads around the fjords. But I am not complaining. Spectacular stuff. It's what Iceland is all about. I don't really get this feel anywhere else in the world apart from maybe New Zealand. Saturday the 15th of June, 2019. Left the site at Drangsnes and had a good look at the town along the fosse. Lots of holiday cottages, but a lovely old school house and church. There were 3 hot spring pools along the front for general use. As we had come into the town yesterday we had seen those along with endless plumes of steam emitting from the water's edge. This was quite a lively active volcanic area, hence the public baths for all to use. KeefH went over for a closer look. Sadly one of them had so much gunge in it you would never want to use it. As it was blowing a hoolie decided not to try even the perfectly okay ones. We then left Drangsnes and headed back out around the fjord to join the 61 through Hvammstavik, and stopping in Reykjavik, which is the whale tour capital. We went down to the harbour and around the church and old town areas. A very interesting place. We will be back. We carried on to Hvammstangi, our campsite for the night, parking up on the flattest bit of grassland not too far away from the limited number electric points, so our long cable stretched. The field backed onto the heritage church with its picket fence. After setting up and having our usual cuppa, we went for a walk to have a look at the church, all very interesting. Quite liked the area and the sunsets were just wonderful. Had tea, relaxed, and went to bed.
I'm so happy it hurts. I'm so happy it hurts. I'm so glad it's outrageous. I'm so happy it hurts. That stupid grin on my face must be some kind of curse. You put a spell on me, baby. I'm so happy it hurts. Sun is shining, there ain't no more rain. Step on the gas and forget all the pain. Let it go. Out on the open road. Rocky Mountains in the rearview there. I can't wait till I get there. Alright, I'm gonna drive all night. Been around the world, there ain't much I've missed, but I ain't felt nothing like this. I'm so happy it hurts. I'm so happy it hurts. I'm so glad it's outrageous. I'm so happy it hurts. That stupid grin on my face must be some kind of curse. You put a spell on me, baby. I'm so happy it hurts. I'm so happy it hurts. I'm so happy it hurts. I'm so glad it's outrageous. You know I think it's contagious. That stupid grin on my face must be some kind of curse. You put a spell on me, baby. I'm so happy it hurts. I'm so happy it hurts. I'm so happy it hurts. desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, because there ain't no one for to give you no pain. La 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 la. After 2 days in the desert sun, my skin began to turn red. After 3 days in the desert fun, I was looking at a riverbed, and the story it told of a river that flowed made me sad to think it was dead. You see, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no pain. La 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 la. After 9 days, I let the horse run free, 'cause the desert had turned to sea. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rings. The ocean is a desert with its life underground.